Today, toward the end of class, we had been talking about sine graphs, starting out with just basically what is the parent function of the sine graph and then applying transformations to that. And we had done numbers 1 and 2 on the sheet. Here was number 1, and here was number 2. And I told you there was one other thing I wanted to make sure you saw before you tried to do all of these. We had talked about the fact that, and I think it's on the reverse of this, we look at this b, we look at this number that's out in front of the parentheses. We don't want the parentheses to have a number right behind it. We want it to just be theta or x or whatever your angle is right behind the parentheses. So we have a b out front. Sometimes, like in number 2, the b is given to us. It's 1/2. Sometimes we have to do the factoring it out ourselves. So that's what I wanted to address with you real quick, is when that happens. So let's look at number 3. Y is the sine of the quantity 2 theta plus pi minus 3. Okay, so we're taking this 2 out from inside of here. That's basically the opposite of distributive property. We're pulling it back out. But if we pull it back out, we have to pull it out of everything in the parentheses. Because if I rewrite this with a 2 out in front, that means 2 times everything that's inside of there. So whatever number's in front of theta needs to come out. But that means we've divided it out. So we need to divide it out of this as well. So pi divided by 2 is just going to be pi over 2. So that's how you figure out what's left here after you have to factor something out. Also keep in mind you can check yourself that at this point we can check and see if distributive property would put it back the way it is. So now my amplitude is 1. My b is 2, which means that my period is going to be 2 pi divided by 2, or just pi. My phase shift is negative pi over 2, or left pi over 2. And my vertical shift is down 3. Okay? Let's look at another one where we have to factor something out. How about number 8? Number 8 starts out looking like this. So again, we want it to be just a plain theta behind the parentheses here. So we're going to have to take, that's basically the same thing right now as saying 1/3 theta. Theta over 3 is the same thing as 1/3 theta. So we have to take the 1/3 out. So the 1/3 needs to come right out here. So when we take 1/3 out of this, we're dividing everything here by 1/3. So let's see how that works. If you're not sure, I would suggest doing what I'm about to do and going over to the side and saying, well, if I have negative pi over 2 and I'm dividing that by 1/3, dividing it by 1/3 is the same as multiplying, when we divide by a fraction, multiplying by the reciprocal. So that's negative 3 pi over 12. 3/12 is 1/4. And that is what's going to be left when I divide out a 1/3. So minus pi over 4 minus 2. So now my amplitude is 1. B is 1/3. So if B is 1/3, that means the period is 2 pi divided by 1/3, which means 2 pi times 3 over 1. Remember, when we divide by a fraction, we flip it and multiply. So the period is 6 pi. That means when we do our increments, we're going to be doing 6 pi divided into 4 pieces. So each piece is 3 pi over 2, or 3/2 pi. Phase shift here is right pi over 4, and vertical shift is down 2. So that's where our midline is going to be. So that's how number 8 works before we start getting it to graph. I also want to point out on problems like number 6, number 10, if you have this all by itself, not times pi anything number out front. That's basically just writing it in a different order than we're used to seeing it in. So to be able to tell what that is, we want to write it in the order we're used to seeing it in. So if you just have, in other words, the sine expression, we like to put the sine expression first. So this is the same thing as 3 sine theta plus pi over 2 all plus 2. So if you have that random number out here and then a plus or a minus sign, move it to the back. Okay? Its sign goes with it, move it to the back. And that should give you a pretty decent start at these problems. Also, I'm going to post the keys, so you might want to do a few and then check the ones you've done. See you tomorrow.